Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of That's Ruddy Mysterious, a podcast of short tales about true mysteries. What created the Potomsky Crater? Who was involved in the 1963 Great Train Robbery? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sruddymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about the Coral Castle. The Coral Castle was built by Ed Leedskalnin beginning in the year 1923 and ending upon his death in 1951. It's made of large slabs of oolite limestone and was built entirely by Ed himself. How did he do it? When asked, Ed would say, "I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids and have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru, Yucatan, and Asia, with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons." His completed castle boasts a Polaris telescope, rocking chairs, a 2-story castle tower, which is where Ed lived, an accurate sundial, an obelisk, a well, a 500-pound heart-shaped table, a 9-ton or 8-metric-ton gate which swung freely, a fountain, a 13-ton or 11.8 metric ton, 20-foot or 6-meter-long table surrounded by 10 chairs and carved into the shape of Florida, all made from limestone. Ed Leedskalnin was born in Riga, Latvia on August 10, 1887. When he was 26 years old, he fell in love with a girl 10 years his junior. They were engaged to be married. It's unclear if her name was Agnes Scuffs or possibly Hermine Lucis. According to some legends, he called her his Sweet 16. The day before the wedding, Agnes or Hermine called the whole thing off. That's when Ed moved to the U.S. alone. Through the years, Ed moved between places, living in Canada, California, Texas, New York, and other places, before finally settling on Florida in 1918 due to his health. Ed stood just over 5 feet tall and weighed about 100 pounds. It's hard to imagine such a small man doing all this work by himself. At first, Ed Leedskalnin lived in Florida City, and that's where construction of his Coral Castle began. In 1923, Ed opened the Coral Castle up to visitors and often made it a point to greet those visitors personally. In 1936, however, Ed made the move about 10 miles away to Homestead, Florida, the Coral Castle's final location. It took him 3 years to move everything he had already built. 28655 South Dixie Highway in Miami, Florida is a 10-acre property upon which the final castle stands. In order to make the move, Ed converted an old chassis from a Republic truck. He had a friend who owned a tractor help him, and although no one ever saw him loading or unloading the truck, he was seen during the move. When asked how he managed to move such large blocks, Ed replied that he understood the laws of weight and leverage well. One story explained that Ed once pulled into a local quarry to buy several tons of coral. When the foreman asked how Ed planned to load the stone into his truck, Ed asked him to turn his back. A few minutes later, the foreman turned around and all of the coral was on the truck and Ed was sitting inside the cab. Ed came from a family of stonemasons, so he had the skills to build something truly incredible. Ed had been taught the skills in Latvia. Ed used homemade hand tools to harvest the oolite limestone from his yard and shape it into massive structures. He claimed to know the secrets of the pyramids, but that he wouldn't tell them. He said that if he could learn them, anyone could. He also said that he used a perpetual motion holder to move the large stones into place. Scientists say no such device does or even could exist. Despite his claims, Ed's tool shed was full of pulleys, hand tools, and everything else needed to work on rocks. Ed built under the cover of dark, working by light of a lantern. One night, some teenagers watched him work and claimed that Ed made the rocks levitate. When asked, Ed said that he didn't use any mortar on the castle, but a visual inspection reveals no light passes between the rocks. This doesn't seem possible without mortar. In 1940, Ed's move to Homestead was complete. He had moved all of the structures into place, but the work was far from done. The walls weighed 125 pounds, or just over 56 kilograms per cubic foot. Each section was 8 feet, or just under 2.5 meters tall, 4 feet, or a little over 1 meter wide, and 3 feet, or just under a meter thick. Each section weighed more than 8.5 US tons, or 7.7 metric tons. How did he manage to move such big blocks of limestone? Why did Ed build the Coral Castle? No one knows for sure. Some believe it is a testament to his lost love because he said he built it for his sweet 16, but Ed was something of a philosopher and had written some pamphlets. One was called A Book in Every Home, in which he claims that the schools and churches were cheapening the girls and sending them out with the boys. In this pamphlet, he also wrote about his sweet 16 theory, which he said was not about a 16-year-old girl, but was instead about a brand new one. This could mean that when Ed was referring to his sweet 16 when discussing his castle, he was not actually talking about Agnes Scuffs, but instead an ideology. However, he did invite Scuffs to the castle several times, and she never took him up on the offer. Despite her refusal to come, Ed had opened up the castle to visitors, and many of them did come to see it, at 10 cents apiece. Ed Leedskalnin suffered from poor health and even had tuberculosis multiple times. On December 4th, 1951, Ed put a sign on his castle saying "Going to hospital." He then took a bus to Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami and died 3 days later from kidney problems and possible stomach cancer. Ed was 64 years old. He had worked on his Coral Castle for 28 years, and upon his death the work ceased. Ed Leedskalnin was buried in Miami Memorial Park Cemetery. Ed's nephew inherited the Coral Castle. 2 years after Ed's death, his nephew sold the castle to a family from Illinois. During the sale, a box of Ed's possessions showed up. The box contained information that led to Ed's life savings, 35 $100 bills. Ed had made his living by allowing guests to tour his Coral Castle for 10 cents apiece up until the 1940s. In the 1950s, the price increased to 25 cents. Today, a tour of the Coral Castle runs visitors $18 each. Today, it takes visitors about an hour to tour the entire castle. The castle is open to visitors from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day except for Monday and Wednesday. Ed's construction of the Coral Castle remains largely a mystery. In 1986, the large gate at the entrance of the park, which had once swung with a strong breeze, stopped working. During the repairs, it was discovered that the gate rotated on a metal shaft and the gate sat on truck bearings. Finally, one of the mysteries had been solved. Billy Idol wrote the song Sweet 16 as a tribute to Ed Leedskalnin and his Coral Castle. In 1996, Ed's friend Orville Irwin wrote the book Mr. Cant is Dead, the Story of the Coral Castle, in which he explained how Ed managed to build his castle. He wrote, "Back in the days when Ed started carving out his original stones, he was a generation who knew accomplishments by the sweat of the brow. It wasn't mysticism, but hard work. This is how Ed really accomplished the massive project." How was Ed capable of building such a large castle all by himself? Why did he build it? What do you think? Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ruddy Mysterious. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and follow That's Ruddy Mysterious to be updated about new episodes. Tune in next Tuesday for another thought-provoking tale.